Hello, friends, and welcome back to Midnight Horror Picture Show. I'm your host, Neil, and today's guest, Tiffany Albright, describes herself as a deviant queer writer/producer living in the South. Her work centers women and LGBTQ plus stories and explores identity, gender, sexuality, and class in genre settings, from horror to romance. Tiffany has been an artist in residence at Wildacres in the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. She's placed in the Academy Nicholl Screenwriting Fellowship, Austin Film Festival, the Stowe Story Labs Fellowship, the Page Awards, and ScreenCraft. Tiffany is a high school dropout with a master's degree who has lived on 3 continents but always felt home tugging her back. She now lives in North Carolina, where she founded and runs the nonprofit Queer Fear Film Festival, the production company Lunar Kitchen Films, and the imprint The Crackling Quill. She busy. I'm very excited to share with you my conversation with Tiffany Albright. Tiffany, welcome to the Midnight Horror Picture Show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. Would you do me a favor and just start with talking a little bit about Queer Fear, how that came to be, and really your mission behind that?
Absolutely. So, Queer Fear was really a way to keep myself from going stir crazy during the early days of pandemic lockdown. I had first gotten into filmmaking thanks to friends who had dragged me to a film festival when I didn't even know what that was, but it was a queer film festival held in Johannesburg, South Africa, while I was on a study abroad semester. And I had obviously been exposed to queer media, but it was really sort of eye-opening and genuinely life-changing to see that sort of concentration of independent films, short films, international films, right, of all different genres and types. And I really just left the theater a little shell-shocked and was like, how do I get involved with the people who are making this type of film? So when I came back to the States, I changed schools and changed my majors and entered a film program, and immediately got involved with student film festival work. So I was never a filmmaker without having film festivals be a really important part of my community and my like identity and the way that I wanted to interact with people. So I graduated and started working at film festivals. I've at this point volunteered at more than a dozen. And I knew for a long time that I wanted to start my own film festival, but I didn't quite know what kind, was there really a gap to be filled? But I kept finding as I was making films and putting them out onto the festival circuit that as a person who was interested in telling queer genre stories, particularly like horror and sort of thriller-esque stories, that I was getting programmed in blocks that didn't have a lot of films that were similar to mine, even though I knew from my filmmaker community that there were other people making queer genre cinema, right? But I would be the only horror film in a queer film block, or I would be the only queer film in a horror film block. And I wanted there to be a way to recognize that concentration and to, give people who love genre films a place to come together. So I was a little bit thinking on that, pondering it. But when everything shut down, during those early lockdown days, I had worked on a film that was about to have an in-person premiere. Lots of filmmakers had this experience, right? Lots of people in the arts, just live events were not a thing. And there were a bunch of internet companies that sprang up to help you, provide a platform to show those pieces. So a filmmaker friend of mine did an online premiere for that film, and it was what it was, right? It's exciting in that you get to show it, but it was, disappointing in that you couldn't do it the way that you had originally envisioned it. The platform was kind of great. It was called Eventive. It's still around. It's still going strong. And they were really savvy. They made him buy an entire annual subscription, and he just wanted to do this one event. So he sent an email to a couple of us and was like, anybody want this platform for anything in the next 10 months? Let me know. And it snowballed from there. It was really about 48 hours that I molded over maybe, and then committed to running a film festival. We had a call for entries and a landing page up on a just sort of basic website within the week. And I think it was 6 weeks later, we closed our call for entries, picked a bunch of films, and ran with our first year. It was just about as DIY and thrown together as you can get. And it was a total blast. Even though we weren't in person, we had a really great online audience. It was everything that I wanted. And I knew that it wasn't going to be just a one-off like we had started the festival. And here we
Right.
are, 6 years later.
Yeah, wow, wow. I definitely had a fair share of my work shown virtually in 2020 and 2021. So I know that feeling. And there is like, I think there was opportunity there because I went to a lot where there wasn't a lot of interaction, or it was just kind of like watching the static block of films with not a lot of discussion. And it just really doubled down on making you feel a little bit more isolated as opposed
Mm,
to like being at an in-person event. But there were other ones where I had people reaching out to me afterwards for days of like, oh my gosh, I just saw this, or I watched the replay and I got to see your work and I love this piece. And like, it's great. And I've kept in touch with a lot of people through that and made some friends in the filmmaking
I
community.
love that.
So so tell me a little bit about how you made the jump from a solely virtual festival to doing an in-person event, and what were some challenges with that?
There were definitely some challenges, but I think when I had dreamed right before we launched in that very accelerated way. I had always dreamed of the in-person experience, right? Because like you say, those opportunities to connect with audience members, to get that sort of instantaneous feedback, and also that somebody coming up to you after a screening, like it's such a special experience as a filmmaker and as a programmer, somebody who organizes the festival, right? That it was still in my mind at that time that we would get that chance, right? So we are really lucky here in the Triad of North Carolina. We've got a really great indie art house cinema in Winston-Salem called Aperture Cinema. I had been a fan of theirs for a long time. They were the first people I approached in 2021 because I knew that they would make a great partner for us. I knew they'd be an awesome, really welcoming venue. Our mission of bringing communities together, which exactly like you were saying, right, was central even to that first experience online. We did Q&As for every block. We really encouraged that audience participation. And to me, it seemed like an extension of that experience to offer that as an in-person opportunity. So Aperture, thankfully, was very excited and on board. Our second year of the festival, we did a hybrid festival. We continued to use that Eventive platform because it had been such a success for us, and it was a really great way to connect with audiences who couldn't get here, and filmmakers who couldn't get here. And that year, we did 2 days of in-person screenings, and then we repeated that entire program online on a third day. And that did create some just like logistical challenges in terms of like me and the couple of volunteers who help run the festival were all very tired.
Yeah.
It was a lot. I mean, there are festivals that, run for weeks and weeks. But as an all volunteer run event, it is a big lift, right? And then just making sure that everything was set with the venue was an additional layer of, coordination. And then thankfully, because we'd done the Eventive platform one year, we could set that up and test in advance, and we sort of knew how that would work. Um, and so that was a really successful year. And I think if we were a bigger, more well-resourced festival, I think we probably would have continued to follow that hybrid model. There are still a number of festivals that I'm a big fan of who are doing it. And we've encountered a bunch of filmmakers who are all over the spectrum in terms of whether they're really into that or whether they're sort of, ideologically opposed to virtual events. But I think it was a really great accessible offering. Although we did find even in that first hybrid year that our audience really wanted to come in person. We had people traveling from quite a distance just to be there because I think it is such an inbuilt part of the filmmaker experience if you're an indie filmmaker who does the festival circuit, and the audience experience if you are a big fan of movies, you want to go to the theater and you want to have that experience. So the numbers didn't work out for us to continue doing the hybrid model, which was a relief in that it made it at least a little easier for us to streamline the process. But I do think something is lost for the sake of accessibility for folks who can't travel or who can't attend in-person events. And so I struggle with that a little bit still, trying to imagine what the most inclusive version of not just our event is, but like as filmmakers and artists, like what is the most inclusive version of our art form?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it reflects in everything like that attention to detail of like making not only an inclusive event, but being very, I think, aware of what it takes to host one and do that in the most professional manner possible is very reflected through my experience with Queer Fear.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I have told everyone since, since I was there in 2024 that it is absolutely one of my favorite festivals I've been to. It's also like one of the best run, and I'm not just blowing smoke, but
Want to click the little heart emoji,
yeah,
Neil?
yeah, yeah. No, no, it seriously, Queer Fear is one of the best festival experiences I've had, and I've been to a lot. I think, especially when you talk about being a smaller festival with not as much funding, where you allocate your funding, um, is it's interesting in the sense that it's unique, right? Um, for your for Queer Fear's like submission price point, right? For submission fees to offer travel stipends is not something a lot of festivals at that price point do.
I am familiar
Yeah.
as the filmmaker, yes.
And that was a huge thing. When I got that email that was like, "Hey, if you need some help getting down here, we have travel stipends available if you want to come down." And I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, that makes my decision a lot easier, because coming down to North Carolina is a bit of a drive from Michigan, but but I mean, it's also like I say drive, which really my Midwest is just super showing, instead of flying. But yeah, no, getting down there and Jen and I made a whole trip out of it. It was a wonderful weekend we had there. So, um, is that just when you decided, hey, these are this is what I want to do for the filmmakers, is that based on your own experience with festivals as a filmmaker? Or the lack of what you've experienced that you would have liked to at different
A little bit,
festivals?
I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure that that has influenced it, but I hadn't ever really thought about it in that way, right? I've played at a number of festivals and almost none of them, like you say, offer any kind of travel funding. And the couple that have, I've been like, ooh, I feel so fancy. This is
Right.
really cool. Like, but I think it really grew out of a place of like so back to that very first year, bringing together filmmakers is is like a core part of the queer fear mission. Um, and I'll go ahead and just admit, right, partly selfishly, because I wanted to know more queer filmmakers, right? I wanted to know more people personally who are working in the space that I also work in, right? It's a way to just bring together all of the coolest people that I whose work I admire and that I want to get to know better. So we obviously the first year virtual didn't do travel funding. Second year, we're still basically running on the most threadbare shoestring in paying
Right.
for Eventive, right? So we didn't do travel funding. But I think by the third year, in looking at the budget and making that really tough call to cut out the hybrid model and figuring out where the best place to put our resources was, it was a little bit of a no-brainer um, to to say, well, if we want filmmakers to come and be part of these Q&As, if that's a central mission of ours, then we need to support it because it's hard, right? Right, as filmmakers, and I'm sure some of your listeners can resonate with this, right? You submit a lot. You never know where you're going to get in, and it's always like very exciting, but even just two or three festivals a year, you're just like, oh my gosh, because you want to take advantage of it. Like there, it almost seems like there is no point if you never go to the festival. And I say this to young filmmakers all the time. If you're going to submit, you need to try to go, right? So think strategically about what you're submitting to and all of that, right? So I think it was knowing all of that, I guess, yeah, from a filmmaker's perspective, that it was really important to support that if we meant it when we said that was important to us. So at this point, the filmmaker travel funding has grown to be probably the single largest line item in our budget. And we just keep eking that number a little higher every chance we get. We did a dedicated fundraiser this year so that we could grow that pot some more because it just enriches the experience on site for all the audience members. But I think that every year I've heard from filmmakers who have come and like you said, had such a positive experience. And I know as a filmmaker, having attended festivals out of pocket and had kind of crappy experiences, that is the absolute nightmare, you have failed, burn it all down scenario, right? If I have a filmmaker who comes and says that it was not worth the money and time that they spent, then I will feel like I have failed. So
Well,
we do
I
everything that we can to make that not be the case.
and I think that's a really good thing. I don't think that's something you necessarily have to worry about, but like that's it. I think as a filmmaker, and I've been to festivals kind of all over the spectrum because the bit of advice you gave there, I don't want that to get buried. If you're a younger filmmaker starting out, be do your research on the festivals. And I think we may have talked about this a little bit before in previous episodes, but it's do your research. Um, and yeah, make sure there's at least a good chance that you can attend the festivals you're submitting to, right? Because
Yeah.
as much as like at the end of the day, grabbing laurels from 20 festivals but going to none doesn't help you as much as you think it might.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
all
think
about
so. Yeah.
the festivals are about community, right? It's because half of that audience is going to be other filmmakers, right? So, and these are people who can either, it's all connections, and sometimes it can be genuine friendships. I mean, when I started this podcast, because I knew I wasn't going to travel to festivals for at least all of 2025. When I started this, though, I mean, if you look at the guests in the past episodes before this, I mean, Kay, Mariel, Rachel, all three of those people I met at Queer Fear in
Yes.
2024. And I've been lucky enough to keep in touch with here and there, and they agreed to do this. So, I mean, and they're all doing incredible things. And I get to learn from them, see what they're doing, support them. And, I'm sure once, and they've been so great supporting me with the podcast. It's been a wonderful thing. So,
That just makes my heart so happy. And that's the whole point, right? That's why we'll keep doing it as long as we keep creating those connections, creating those experiences for people. Um, that was what I always wanted.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the decision to switch it up from an October festival to February this year.
So I wish that there was some grand like reason, but it was really practical. Not only is October super saturated with horror things, which did work to our advantage in some respects, but it also just made it really hard to get out and like support other events that are happening in the area that I'm really interested in because I was so busy with the festival. But my day job, which has nothing to do with Queer Fear, also has a really packed schedule in the fall. So it was a few years of like crash and burn. I don't think I can get out of bed come like the beginning of November, but work is still really crazy and you're rolling right into the holidays. So um after year four, it was a real like come to Jesus, like how do we not let this event like put us in this physical and mental and emotional state anymore?
Protect your
And
peace. Yes.
thank goodness I have just like some of the most wonderful, supportive, brilliant people around me. And so a friend of mine was just like, what if you didn't do it in October? And it was like it had never occurred to me, right? It was just like this is just it's when we started. We will do it this way because and no, okay, yeah, so we can move it, right? And then it was a matter of looking at the calendar, thinking about when things were a little less hectic and saturated. And then it was fun to be like, well, maybe there's like because we get a lot of not romantic, but romance gone wrong films, maybe is a fair way to look at it, right? It seemed
Fair.
like there might be a fun opportunity to like play around with Valentine's Day, anti-Valentine's Day sentiments in February. And so it wasn't anything that we sort of tested with our audience. It was just like, we can't do October anymore. This is what we've got. And we threw the date out and didn't really know if we would lose a bunch of people, if we would find new people to replace them, if filmmakers would have an easier or harder time getting there. It was just a grand experiment, and thank goodness it was totally successful. We kept a lot of the same audience. We brought some new folks in, and anecdotally, we got feedback that filmmakers were experiencing the same thing, that they were really swamped in October with festivals and conflicts, and that February was a little chiller. So we're definitely keeping that date for now and hoping to continue to, grow community around it and make it a little February tentpole activity now.
I think that's such a wonderful idea because you're right. Especially for filmmakers, well, genre filmmakers doing horror,
Yeah.
it feels like 90% of festivals that you're going to submit to are from mid-September through October 31st. And so
Yep.
any given Saturday, if you want to submit your film, and this goes, right in line with what we were talking about, the advice you were talking about earlier, you can get accepted into four festivals that all run on the same day. And it's very easy if you're not paying attention to those dates and like whatever, and you might want to have a backup, right? Not put all your eggs in one basket for a date, but if you get accepted to both, then I mean, great problem to have, but you have a choice to make.
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit about this year's programming and the filmmakers who were able to make it? Anything that really stood out that you want to share?
Definitely. Oh gosh, we had so many standouts. It was such a fun year. So we played 41 short films
Wow.
from 11 countries. And so the one thing that was a bit of a change was the reason we were able to do that was because we had to make the very tough choice not to program a feature, which is the first time that we've never played a feature before. Um, and I think it's so hard, right? I have incredible respect for anybody who makes a movie, but indie filmmakers who make features, I bow down, right? Like it is such
Right.
a hard thing to do, but then it's doubly hard to get programmed because you'll sit in front of your programming committee and be like, we can play this one film that people were really split on, right? So its rating ended up being sort of mid-range, or we can play these 8 short films that basically everybody loved.
Yeah.
Right. And this was the first year that we had to make a decision that was that stark. And that was what it came down to. But one of the things that I love about film festivals in particular is it's still kind of the only place that an audience is gonna watch a short film,
Right.
right? Or not even a short film, but watch a bunch of short films in a block that they would probably never encounter, and a lot of them still that won't ever be released online, right?
Right.
Um, so it's a sort of really special experience that I really believe in, right? I think the vast majority of indie filmmakers start out making shorts. So even though I'm primarily working on features these days, I still have a great love for short form and a love as a programmer of putting together blocks to show those films to people. Um, so this year we got to program some things because we had made that choice that maybe wouldn't traditionally feel like picks for a genre horror festival. But some of my favorite films, and this wasn't the first time, but we haven't always had a sort of light horror shorts block, which is a still pretty broad term. I wouldn't say it's like a child-friendly block, but it's like light on gore and like heavy on psychological themes. But we played a couple of shorts in that block that just felt particularly impactful this year. We had a short called The Last Goodbye that the filmmaker doesn't know this. They probably won't listen to this. Who knows? It was like our runner-up for Audience Choice Film, but it was one of my favorite films that we've ever played. It's about a woman who is a funeral director who runs into a one-night stand that she had while she's doing the service for this woman's grandma.
Oh
And
no.
it is like it is awkward in the extreme, right? There's internalized homophobia and there's like family drama, and it's shot beautifully. But it was one of those sort of surprises, right? You never know as a programmer if a film will land with your audience in the same way that it lands for you. And I was a little bit stunned, to be honest, that among the genre fans who show up to our festival, that was runner up for audience choice because there's no gore, right? There's no jump scares. There's none of the like traditional elements. There's just this like pervasive uneasiness about the situation, and this like gut-wrenching feeling that the filmmakers do such an amazing job of evoking in the performances and all of that. But it was really fun to see the audience like honor the spirit of that film fitting in with the other work that we did. Like I think some of the other films in that block were like a parent dealing with, the death of a child, and sort of seeing her ghost and like being being impacted by that. And we had a really cool short film called Evaders that was in that block too about a sort of dystopian future world uh, where young people get to choose their gender when they come of age.
Oh,
Cool, but it still exists in a binary, and there are all of these like rules that constrain you once you make your gender choice. And it was just a really interesting way to approach a very fucking timely
yeah.
subject. Right. But I think I'm just constantly amazed at the diversity of stories and the diversity of like approaches to storytelling. We always have a really easy time programming our like horror comedy block because we get so many campy films, right? So many like really fun, like gross out, but that block is, continuously like one of the audience favorites, right? And this year we leaned heavily into the Valentine's Day of it all and programmed a lot of sort of dating app one night stand films gone wrong. And it was really interesting to see queer filmmakers like iterate on that subject, right? You could definitely see like through lines and similarities, but like also just really deeply personal human emotions. Just like I know that screenwriter and director has had some experience that they put on film here, right? And it just
100%.
makes it all feel really, really human and really relatable, which is, I think, to somebody who isn't a genre film fan, is maybe surprising, right? They expect dramas to do that work, but like, I think there is no catharsis like the catharsis of a horror film, right? Getting
Agreed.
to go through the whole range of emotions and sometimes to get to end with a bloody good send off or not, but it's just a ton of fun. Like I love all of the programming that we do. We did a couple of the toughest films that we've ever programmed this year. We had a Turkish film called Skin of Sadness. It was again just one of the most beautiful films visually I've ever seen. I think every still from it could have been a portrait, but the film is about a man who chooses death by cannibalism, basically.
Okay.
And it is intense and graphic and on screen. And I definitely saw some people in the theater like covering their eyes because it was really tough. Um, but I think it's really important to make space for difficult stories too. And I think that's something that we talk a lot about in our programming committee. Um, is is like it's not really about like can the audience handle this? That's not the approach, but like how do we how do we make space for stories that feel authentic but also hard? And I think post festival this year we had a lot of conversations about how we can keep improving the ways that we like prepare audiences to be in those spaces with really difficult subject matter like that. Even though we're right on the face of it, right? We say horror, we're genre, but it's I think people come expecting the campy stuff, and sometimes you'll get walloped by a good old drama masquerading as a horror film.
100%. 100%. The care you take as a programmer, like not just you, but with your committee, obviously, but to really focus on that because I'm not sure that all festival programmers think that way. And in a way where you're seriously curating not just a block of films, but like where where can we identify ones that surpass genre, and really speak to the experience of the filmmakers behind them, right? And I think that's a wonderful thing to do, especially, as a queer focused film festival to really explore the expanse of the stories that people are telling is a
Thank
testament
you.
to what you're doing. So I think that's wonderful.
We do. We spend a lot of time on it because I think it's, I mean, I had sort of said this earlier, but I'll rephrase it a little bit because I think it bears repeating. It is it is hard to find places for these types of films in larger, more mainstream festivals, right? I attend a lot of festivals. I look at a lot of other people's programming, and there aren't a lot of genre films playing at queer focused film festivals, right? You see a lot of dramas and you see a lot of documentaries, but not a lot of these types of films. And then you'll get them sort of interspersed into blocks at sort of more general interest festivals, but they do often feel sort of not out of step, but just off on their own little island sometimes. And so one of my favorite blocks that we have had for the I think maybe the past 3 years. I think we're maybe always going to have it because it's probably the most fun to program in a different way than the horror comedy shorts. But is our Weird and Wild block. In it is basically the wild card um, films that are genre adjacent, maybe, but that just feel like I'm not sure who would ever program this or where they would put it, except I want audiences to see it. Right. And that's sort of when we have that initial like programming committee meeting, like that is how I describe this. It's a little bit of the like what the fuck, but also that was really good. So we had a film this year called In the Valley. And the filmmaker Adam was just like the loveliest human, flew in from California, had the best time at the festival. And it's a 25-minute, I believe, or maybe even 30. So it's long. It's a long short. And it's this very like experimental desert, maybe aliens, maybe, it's like it's
Right.
hard to follow the story, and it's intentionally ambiguous about what's happening to this character, but it's like the best kind of fever dream, and when it ends you're just like, whoa, that was a good time, right? So I think it was the first film this year that we were like, absolutely, that is going in that block, that will be the tent pole of that block if it has to be. and and I just that's one of the things that makes this such a fun event to run. Um, you never know what's gonna show up in your queue for submissions. Um, and you do see trends, right? You see things that are just like, oh, that's the queer version of such and such slasher or whatever.
Right.
But sometimes you see stories that you're just like, how did somebody even come up with that? And it is like boldly queer. Like In the Valley is so gay. It is so in your face, violent and strange and weird. And I just want there to be space for a film like that. So we made it, right? We have made that space, and I want more of those films.
I love that. I love that. That's I we're gonna we're just going to leave it there because I think that's a wonderful place to leave it. So for 2027,
Yep.
still in February, right?
Yes.
And is it May that submissions open?
Submissions open May 1st and are open all the way through the fall.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, for any of our listeners who are interested in either submitting their work or attending the Queer Fear Film Festival, on our website at hereifilms.com, I'll have it linked in the show notes. On the Midnight Horror Picture Show page, we have in our favorite festival section now, which will take you straight to their website or Film Freeway page. So we'll have all the information for Queer Fear up there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Tiffany, okay. So we touched a little bit on you being a filmmaker before being a festival runner, and continuing to make films. Can you talk to us a little bit about that journey, some of the shorts you've worked on? Looking at your past work, it seems you are like very much a writer at heart. Yeah.
For sure. Definitely. My film journey started as like an AD. I'm a really organized human. So I think my artist friend saw that and was like, hey, you should try this. But my little 6-year-old self, you're like, what was the first thing you ever wanted to do? I wanted to be a writer. I had a little pen that I got for Christmas that said world's greatest writer on it. And it was like my most treasured possession.
That's
But
adorable.
I didn't come into filmmaking through writing, right? Like I talked about how I got into filmmaking and film festival work. So I didn't connect those two pieces for a like embarrassingly long time. It was not until post film school that I made a film that I wrote. And it was a little short psychological thriller. We shot it in my friend's backyard, and it was so much fun. And I learned a couple of things through that experience. One was that, oh, I like this, right? This writing films thing is fun. I don't really like directing, and I still love producing, right? So it's been a little bit of a journey since then to sort of find my place. I've definitely continued to produce for myself and other friends. I put together a few more shorts projects that I directed because I'm also a little bit of a control freak and have trouble like handing stuff over.
Yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't say that I was ever particularly successful as a director. And I think I found my greatest happiness when I started writing feature films, which has been just a ton of fun. I've got, my big file now of 20 features, and who knows, someday I'll find the money to make them. Um, and then doing more producing work for friends who had projects that I really got behind and believed in. And those two things I think have brought me the greatest joy, and I will probably keep doing them forever.
I love that. I love that. I mean, so it's not just finding, your strengths, but it's finding your passion in that too.
Mhm.
I totally understand the idea of like I think especially when it's your story, to hand it off is a very hard thing to do sometimes. Especially when it's like a short and you're like, well, I could direct this, and I just might have to because I want to tell it exactly how I want to tell it,
Yeah.
which I totally get that. But yeah, no, on your website, I saw your list of screenplays that you've written for features, which is already like a pretty impressive body of work. Um, to have that many screenplay features. Um, but yeah, to use, to recognize your own talents and like, hey, I'm a very organized person, which makes sense for being able to run such a well-oiled machine of a film festival that, and how that goes to just production side of things. That skill set is translatable. Um, and to continue your passion of writing, I think
Mhm.
that's wonderful. So when because you've made what, 6 short films that
Oh, at
you've
least.
written,
Yeah, probably.
something like that. So
Oh, and they're
with that,
definitely not all on the website either,
okay,
but so maybe a few more in there, but
fair, fair, fair. So did you did you run any of those on the festival circuit?
Oh, I think all of them were probably on the festival circuit at some point. So Peak, my first one, I went super regional. I wanted to try to attend festivals with that. So it had a little like North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia run. And that was a bunch of fun. Um, Oh, Live from the Graveyard. I didn't direct that one. That was probably my most successful short, both in terms of programming and in terms of like I had found a director who I'd collaborated with in the theater community, right? This other world that I'm really involved in. She directed, I wrote and produced. We made a bunch of zombies. It was a ton of fun. Um, and that played a bunch of places. We took that sort of more broadly in the Southeast. Um, and and I think it's such a I know I already said this right, but like such a fundamental part of the way that I like think about what filmmaking is. Like festivals are part of it. I was really excited. I guess the most recent short probably that I did was Keepsake, which was actually a oh God, what do you call it? Proof of concept for a feature screenplay.
Okay.
That we had tried to get funding together. We haven't got funding together to make that feature. But we did this little proof of concept over Memorial Day weekend, ooh, 2 or 3 years ago now. Um, and that played at Cucaloris, my favorite North Carolina film festival that's not us, um, and some other really great places, and just had a ton of fun taking that around too, and working with some of my all-time favorite collaborators. Um, it's such a joy, right? Like we kept calling that film Summer Camp, and I think in in its purest form, right? Like indie filmmaking is getting together a bunch of artists that you really like to make something that y'all think people might enjoy watching, right?
Right.
But like to have a good time making the films is now a really important part of my process because I've definitely been on monster sets, not monster in a good way, right? Like truly just make you want to go home and lay in bed and never make another film.
Yeah.
And I think I'm done with that. I think I just won't do that anymore.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And that's, I think most filmmakers I've talked to have like gone through the same thing where it's like, okay, this is becoming not fun anymore.
Yeah.
And, it's real easy, like something's got to give, or I need to figure out some other outlet, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Indie filmmaking does not pay enough
right,
to be
right.
hell.
Exactly, exactly. So, okay, you said which North Carolina festival was your favorite?
Cucaloris down in
Okay.
Wilmington.
All right, awesome. And then do you have any other festivals that you would like absolutely recommend to filmmakers
Oh
looking to
gosh.
submit?
Um, I it's that's a hard one to answer because I think it's so important to think about the film that you have made, right? But
Sure.
I think in general, I love Cucaloris. They're great for like weird stuff and indie stuff. They've got just a very like DIY open ethos and approach to programming. I really like the Atlanta Film Festival. I was there a couple of years ago with a feature, and they treated us really well. So I just appreciate that they honor the filmmaker, right? That's a really important part of the experience for them. Um, it not going to be for any beginning filmmakers, but I have to give a little shout out to Film at Lincoln Center, who run the New York Film Festival, and also some other festivals like New Directors, New Films. Um, I think that they also really care about films and filmmakers. That was my post-college internship, and I learned so much from that experience. I could not have started Queer Fear and treated it as a professional experience if I hadn't had that training at one of the biggest festivals in New York. And then I love, right, all of the queer fests, everything from New Fest, right, our giant New York Film Festival, for queer films, all the way down to like Winston-Salem has Out at the Movies, our very own homegrown LGBTQ film festival. I think so many of these smaller regional festivals are doing this out of love, right? Out of passion and commitment rather than like out of sponsorship seeking and
Right.
donor fundraising. Um, and I just think that they're creating really important spaces for filmmakers and audiences to get exposed to these films. So there are not very few film festivals that I don't love, but that's a short list of favorites at least.
I love it. I love it. So, all right. Well, what's next on the horizon for you? I know we talked about you have a couple features.
I do. So it's going to be a busy year. I am in production on two features right now, with two longtime collaborators of mine. I'm so lucky, right? I was talking about not wanting to work on terrible sets, but that I've built a really great filmmaking community, so I can just keep recycling the same collaborators over and over again. So Victoria Stone is a friend of mine who we started filming this feature, Astrogenesis, under a different title back in pandemic lockdown times. I was doing Queer Fear, and she was doing the Astrogenesis. And we did a number of days of shooting, and thought that we were wrapped on that story, but it turned out that that was only one third of the story. And now we've just gone into production on the other two thirds, and it's going to be this sort of massive, sprawling, incredibly ambitious trans sci-fi feature. But one of the amazing things about it is that um, she just isn't afraid to do these really difficult things, but like also has the skills to pull it off and back it up. We shot some amazing sequences, right? Taking advantage of some of North Carolina's like Western mountain overlooks and doing like rooftop shoots in downtown business districts and like all of these things. But it's all, about not making friends. I wouldn't say we were friends with these people, but like working your connections and presenting yourself professionally and talking
Yeah.
about how important it is for filmmakers to get opportunities to tell stories like this. Really like drawing on the North Carolina connections and the queer connections and the business connections because she's run a post house for a really long time and done a lot of solids for lots of other people. So that's been a really fun project to work on. And I really believe in that film. It is probably the biggest scale project that I have worked on and one of the smallest budgets I have ever worked on. So it's going to be really, really fun to see that pulled off. We're going to be shooting for most of the spring and summer, and hopefully we will be nearing the end of post by the end of the year. Won't commit to saying that we'll finish it, but
Right.
we'll get a lot closer to that finish line. And then a film that I am sure is going to be finished by the end of the summer. I'm also producing this sort of near future thriller called Amerinoid, and that's director George Koslinski. George and I connected through mutual filmmaker friends and have just been collaborating for a number of years. And this film is deeply disturbing and like so timely about a man who is suspected, I will say, of having committed a sort of terrorist mass murder, and the film is part his sort of paranoid ramblings as he tries to, escape the scrutiny that he's under, and then the sort of fallout experienced by his ex-wife and daughter, and the morally gray actions of a really ambitious journalist who is following his story. And it's a chilling script, but it just feels, incredibly timely. So that film is about one third in the can already. George is an incredibly talented and incredibly fast filmmaker. So he is already in the process of building sets, and is going to be shooting the next two thirds of it in May and June. And then he edits like a bat out of hell. I think that film will be done and being submitted to festivals by August.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
really fun too, when you can see a project that just has momentum and it just like gets fired off like a shot. And then Astrogenesis, right, is the exact opposite. It's a multi-year layer of love of project, and that's incredibly fun too, and incredibly rewarding to see um, those pieces come together.
Yeah,
So that's what I'll be
absolutely.
wrapped up in for the next few months at least.
Well, that Both of those sound very interesting, and you'll have to keep me updated so I can keep our listeners
Awesome. Yeah.
updated on, especially when Amerinoid starts going to festivals, we can push that to make sure people show up and check that out. And then, yeah, Astrogenesis, wherever that lands,
Yeah.
just keep us updated for sure. Um, yeah, well, thank you so much for taking the time, Tiffany. I really appreciate your insight into running a festival, kind of what it takes to put together a high level event, and I'm sure our listeners do too.
Thank you.
Um,
It's been such a pleasure. I'm so glad that you asked.
before we go, is there anywhere our listeners can find what you're up to and follow you on their own?
Definitely. My website is probably the easiest thing to see projects that I have already finished, which is I don't get around to putting them up until then. So that, and I will drop that link for you, but tiffany-albright.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, which is really a mix of personal and professional stuff, but definitely the project plugs get thrown up there.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we'll also have links to the Instagram and website for Queer Fear, so everybody can check that out as well. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. You can find out more about what Tiffany is up to next at tiffany-albright.com or on Instagram at tiffany.a.albright. Both of those will be in the show notes below. Make sure to follow the Queer Fear Film Festival at Queer Fear Film Festival on Instagram and learn more at their website, queerfearfilmfestival.org. Again, in the show notes as well. Please make sure to subscribe to Midnight Horror Picture Show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would be so kind as to leave a 5-star review, it's the best way to help build this platform for indie horror creators to be seen. You can find us on Instagram at Midnight Horror Picture Show. Our theme music is by Nick Ferreri. And check out our sister show, Dead Pine Archives, where we dive deep into urban legends, cryptid tales, and local lore. We have some fun stuff lined up for this summer. Midnight Horror Picture Show will be back in June with a new episode. Until then, stay spooky and keep supporting indie horror.